desire. You know, we threw a big party for our sisters recently who celebrated 25 years in religious life. It's a big feat. And a sister and I were called to be on what we call the flower team, or what we renamed it as Team Flower Power. Now, it involved putting large assortments of flower bouquets together. Sounds lovely, right? Except for one small detail. We had to beg for the flowers ourselves. Now, I don't know about you, but the last time I went begging was when I was strapped as a 7-year-old in a car and we'd pass McDonald's on the way home from school. Dad, please, 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 Dad. It never worked. So I knew that this time we had to change our tactics. Picture this. New York City, it's 5 a.m. in the morning, the streets are dark, and it's packed with trucks at the beginning of the day. We arrive in our beat-up van, and this new prayer arises in my heart. Help. Jesus, fill my empty trunk. So I walk into this bustling store, and we came here last year, but the only description that I had was ask for Mike. So I get in there and I ask for Mike, and then I soon quickly realize at this hour of the day, customer service is not a top priority, and I had to use my yelling voice. So I said, is Mike here? One guy pointed to the next room. Now, my original plan of telling Mike my vocation story, my favorite flowers and what they mean to me, turned into a New York City dialect in an instant. Mike, we got a nun party, 25 years hoping for another. One church, 20 tables, empty trunk, what do you think? Now, shocked by myself at this point, Mike looked at me blankly and he's like, 25 years again? I said, no, Mike, new bunch, what do you got? Then Mike, calling across the room, yelled, get this sister whatever she wants. St. Thomas Aquinas says that prayer is asking directed at God for what we need. And faith is necessary to believe that we can obtain from him what we seek. Jesus asked me and you, what do you want me to do for you? The problem with our prayer half the time is not that we're not praying, but that we've given up on desire. You know, we downplay our wants, but the death of desire in our heart is more dangerous than an irregular prayer life. Our hearts are at times empty. It's true for all of us, in need of being filling up. And we can't fill it or fix it ourselves, but turn to the one who can. So we need not only be aware of our needs, but dig up our desires. We have legit desires for level 1 happiness, right? Food, basic needs, pleasures. But if we don't dive deeper into this next level of desires, for meaning, for value, for peace, belonging, we're going to get restless fast, and that level 1 will never fully satisfy us. Pope Benedict, our beloved Pope, described heaven as the supreme moment of satisfaction. I want that. So let's get real about where we're going to be with God forever in heaven, where God fulfills everything we're desperately looking for. And Jesus brought heaven into your heart when he came. He named you as his new home. So don't be afraid to let your heart want what it wants, because that's what it's made for. We can ask questions like, what do I desire in my life now? What do I really want? There's no one in the world that wants you more happy than God himself. This was a big breakthrough for me in my own vocational journey. I was fixated for a while on trying to figure out what God wanted for me, that I left my desires at the door. Thinking maybe that if God wanted something that I didn't, I tried to forget my own desires and figure out his plans instead. And I was afraid that he'd dump them if I ever brought them up. So I kept them down and I tried to protect them in fear that I'd lose out. But oh, how wrong I was. There was a particular moment that God woke me up from this way of praying. I visited the Sisters of Life and was desperately disappointed when they didn't tell me what I should do. Surely, I thought, they know, they'll tell me. But they didn't, because the heart is sacred ground, and God alone calls a heart. It's not our pious plan, it's a response to God's plan. I was praying before the Eucharist in adoration just like last night, and for the first time, I got real and raw with Jesus. And it took a load of courage. But God can handle our stuff, In fact, he wants to hear from us, especially our confusion, our fears, our troubles. All the stuff that we tend to leave outside of church? That's what he's interested in. Because Jesus has incomparable compassion and incomprehensible power to heal, restore, and set us free. So I said in my heart, Jesus, I want to love you like the sisters love you. I want to serve you like they serve you. I want to belong to you like they belong to you. You know, union with God is not reserved for religious. Intimacy with God is the vocation of every baptized soul. And it's planted in every heart that beats. We want God. And that was a moment that I heard his voice. You know, it was nothing audible. God speaks to us in the silent depths of our hearts like whispers, promptings, and they come clothed in peace and freedom. And that's how we recognize his voice, when he draws closer to us and we feel wider in freedom. And I heard this truth from him. I heard him say something like, what if what I want is what you want? And what you want is what I want for your life? You know, nothing has ever set me more free than this truth. I was able to literally let down my desires to the Lord and let go to receive his. Because I knew then, not just in my head, but in my heart, that God's will for our life is the fulfillment of our desires. And I can trust him. You know, however God calls each one of us to receive and give his love with our lives, it's his design and our free response. But every vocation has the same destination. It's union with God. It's holiness. Which is why bringing our actual, real, and raw experiences to prayer is vital. You know, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I hoping? What am I desiring? So do not be afraid to share your heart with Jesus and give your heart the mic.